Good morning to everyone watching online. Great to have all of you here. I know it's a busy time of year. It's hard to believe that Holy Week will begin on Sunday with Palm Sunday. So I know it's busy, so I appreciate you being able to come out. We're going to start with a prayer, and then we'll have some quiet time, which may also allow, if anyone is last minute coming, they could come in before we start the actual discussion. So let's start with a prayer. Lord, help me to live this day quietly, easily, to lean upon your great strength trustfully and restfully, to wait for the unfolding of your will patiently and serenely, to meet others peacefully, joyously, and to face tomorrow confidently and courageously. Amen. And that was attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. So, let's have some quiet time just to focus ourselves. And you can use whatever practice, contemplative practice, has been working for you, or if you want to try something different, which was like last week's practice of openness, which was found on page 47, where you can use a certain word like open or give or share as a word to focus on if your mind starts wandering, or just quiet or visualization of a place you love to be at, whatever makes you feel focused and relaxed. Okay, and we'll do that for about 3 minutes or so. Okay. So this week, we're going to start touching on cultivating patience, which is a challenge. I don't know about you. I have a bit of a challenge with that at times. But before we do that, we will do a review on cultivating generosity, which we started talking about last week. How's it been going with the study? I know it's a long stretch of time, which sometimes is a little more challenging than a short and sweet, couple of sessions and it's done type of study. What's it been like for you? What have been the positives, the sort of life-giving or uplifting parts of the last few weeks, and what's been challenging? So just let's take a few minutes and share. And if you could use the microphone, I know it's not a big group, but it's more for the cameras and the recording.
Is this working?
Yeah.
It's been exciting to experience in reality some of that of which we're studying. Example, generosity. Last Wednesday, I had the opportunity to travel in a small group to Magdalena, Mexico, which is noted for its yearly, and it's gone on for centuries, pilgrimage from Nogales to Magdalena, and that's in honor of and in veneration of Father Kino and another St. Francis Javier.
Okay.
And they walk the 60 miles, 20 miles a day, for over 3 days to go to Magdalena. And our guide, who has done it 5 times, he's from Amato, said he never carries water or food, never worries about shelter, because all the people along the way take care of he and the other pilgrims.
Wow.
That's generosity.
Wow. What a wonderful example of generosity. Yeah. Anyone else like to share about what's been good or easy or maybe some challenging moments through the last few weeks in the study? They have their own microphone there. Yeah.
Okay, I will say for me, just the quiet time of tune out the world and just read and study on these verses is helpful and relaxing. Because I do have a problem with patience. But if you have a minute for a little story, what it also does is bring up old stories in my life. I recall old things happening, and there was a part of this last week that was talking about the gifts of God, as well as on 47, as you were saying, where I was talking about the centering prayer. So I thought of it that time, back some years ago, when I had some severe lower back pain. And it got to the point, all the home remedies didn't work. It was becoming debilitating, so I finally went to the doctor, who sent me for an MRI. And I'm laying in the MRI, it was an open MRI, more room to move around. And I was kind of wiggling around, I couldn't lay still. The attendant told me I had to lay still, it would take 40 minutes. And I thought, I can't lay still for 4 minutes, let alone 40 minutes, what am I going to do? Twice she had to come back and say, we're not going to do this if you don't lay still. I was just in so much pain, it was hard to lay still. So that's when I started the centering prayer. I chose the word Maranatha, which means come Lord in Aramaic. And I was just saying to myself, Maranatha, Maranatha, Maranatha. And the next thing I knew, the attendant came back and said, you're all finished, you can get up now.
Wow.
I assume I fell asleep. I have no conscious memory of anything in between. And when I sat up, the pain was gone. I had no pain. I jumped off the table and literally wiggled around, and I felt completely normal. I had no pain. And the first thing I thought was, oh, they're going to think I was making this up. I was lying. There's nothing wrong with me. When I went to the doctor and he reviewed it, I do have some lower spinal stenosis and scoliosis, but I required no treatment because the pain was gone. And it has never returned. I've got plenty of other pain, but that pain has never returned. And all I could say is I called on the Lord, blacked out, pain was gone. I have no other explanation for it except to
Amazing.
believe that it was a gift from God.
That's amazing. Wow. Anyone else? How's it been for you, Andrea and Clarissa?
I think, when you have things to do and stuff going on in your life, that you forget. I do mine at night. And because I'm one of those people that gets up and has a list of chores, and I don't feel complete until I've accomplished what I have set in my mind I want to do that day. And I always leave this to the end.
Okay.
And then it's been helping me sleep because it just helped. I read it, and I just think, I think of things that I remember, or that I can connect to what it's saying, daily things. Some things are not as grandiose as over here, but for instance, I remembered after we left that last meeting last week, and we talked about the lady who let the guys throw their bikes.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I had a flashback of a story or an incident that happened with my mother. I was like 14 years old. I still couldn't drive, so I wasn't sure how old I was. And, I'm first generation Mexican American, so my mother and father only spoke Spanish at home. And I have this memory, it was late at night. Well, it was dark. I can't tell you what time it was, but it was dark. And it was a stormy night, and we lived kind of in a rural area. And to get to our house, to get to our front door, from the sidewalk to the front door, it wasn't really a sidewalk, but to get from the street to the front door, it was a good 20 yards. And there was a knock on the door, and my mother was like, don't open it, don't, because my father worked swings, so he was gone, so it was just her and I. And she's like, don't open it. And I'm like, well, so I'm calling through the door, like, who is it? Because maybe it's someone we know. And then we hear this woman, and she's crying. And I go, Mom, it's this woman, she's crying. And she's like, so we open it a little bit. And my mom was frightened, and I wasn't, but then later I thought about it as an adult, like they could have come in to rob us, it could have been a home invasion or something like that, right? So we open it, and it's this woman with a baby in her arms, and she's crying, and then and it's a couple, because there's a young guy as well. And they're saying their car broke down, and and it's really bad. The rain is coming down really bad. And so they come in, we give them some towels, and I'm translating, and they're saying that they only live a little ways up the road, but their car broke down and they can't make it. And they had no one to call. I can't remember why we couldn't call, but so my mom, I said, Mom, do you want to give him a ride in there? Well, she was like, and she was hesitant at first, but then she kept seeing the baby, and she's like, yeah, let's give him a ride. And so my mom had a panel van and with passengers and, that could fit in it, and we're in it, and we're driving, and it's scary. And my mom gets scared a couple of times because we go through some washes where you see a log going through, and I'm like, oh, and I think you can make it, you can make it, you can make it. So we get through it, and then we get about their house, you can see the lights on, they live in a trailer park area, it's all dirt, and when my mom says, I can't drive them to the door, I'll get stuck, there's no way, it's too flooded. And so we tell them, sorry, this is as far as we can take you, and so, so the man tries to offer my mother money, and she's like, no, 'cause she's thinking, later on she's thinking, they're so, they need it more than we do, obviously, because, and then I think about all these things. First of all, my mother was a very tough woman, like, we think maybe she was bipolar, so she was very, very hard on me. And to see that side of her was, unique, to see her be as mean as she could be, like to see her be so generous at that time, especially since she was scared. And then also, I kind of had a sense that I don't know the racial differences, if there could have been a tension. Normally, if the guy who was there, I don't feel like he really wanted our help. Kind of like was, you know what I mean? Like I don't need help from some Mexicans, but yet, and then he offered the money, and when we told him no, I think maybe we changed his mind a little bit. I don't know. That's just the sense I got. I couldn't tell you for certain. He never said anything, but it was just the way he was looking at us and not saying anything. Maybe he was just embarrassed. I don't know. So, but I always thought, okay, we did it. We got home. Everything was great. And I had totally forgot about that until last week and until reading this. And I was like, oh. And so those are cool things. And I've had other instances like that where
it triggers something.
Yeah, where it triggers a memory, and it was like, well, okay.
Well, what's interesting in there is there was risk. To do what you did, not only risk for just general safety because of the conditions, but it could have been a setup.
Right. Yeah, and I didn't think about it.
Risk.
Until later.
So generosity, can open the door to a wonderful moment, but it could also be risk. And there's a different kind of risk. There's also a risk of making yourself vulnerable. And it doesn't mean you're necessarily in danger, but anytime we make ourselves vulnerable to something, there's a risk involved. But how do you weigh the risk versus helping someone? Extending that help in that situation. Maybe there may not have been the similar risk in what you experienced, but boy, that's a generosity too, from people who maybe don't have that much.
Absolutely.
But they'll give something, and it goes right to that, right? All things come from thee, and of thine own have we given thee, from the doxology. And there's that sense of even a little bit, but a little bit from one person, and a little bit from someone else, a little bit from someone else. Before you know it, there's more than enough to make sure people had their water or had their food for the 60 miles. That's a pretty hefty. And for those up in Canada, that's over 100 kilometers, okay? Just in case you don't got those numbers, okay? Anyone else?
Just one comment. It seems, as you've seen in the New Testament, that those who have not much tend to be more generous.
Yes. What do you think of that? Actually, that's a really good jump-off point. Those who have less tend to be the ones who are more generous. And why do you think that?
Because you know what it feels like.
You know what it feels like.
Yeah.
So you know what it feels like to maybe be a little hungry or to be lacking something, and so you understand. Anything else related to that?
I think also when you don't have a lot, you don't attach yourself to things as much as when you do have a lot. I think you have a lot more time.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And our society is very different. Our North American society, it's about gathering and amassing items. It's not about just having enough, just enough for what you need and sharing with others. It's more and more and more and more. Unfortunately, that's what we experience. That's why stores like Walmart and others and Costco do so well. Buy in bulk. Yeah. Any other comments, thoughts? So, the generosity. So that works in really well. So to look at generosity, we started it on last week on the Tuesday, page 46, and maybe we could just quickly go through that again. We'll do a little bit of the catch up, and then we'll go on to patience. We got to be patient and wait for that. So, ground generosity in God's generosity. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. And that's the verse that's used at the top of the page. But I love that story that you shared, John. The person who did that trip 5 times, that pilgrimage 5 times,
Yeah.
but never took anything with them.
Nope.
And isn't that what Jesus told his own disciples when they went out 2 by 2? Don't take extra. And basically, you will learn to live off of the generosity and the hospitality of other people. So that's when generosity and hospitality work together too. Right? So we ground it in God's generosity because all things come from God. Our life, our breath, the very, breath we take, this beautiful world, everything we have, which is so different than our society that says, and at the middle of the page, all of this is mine, and I don't need to share if I don't want to. Unfortunately, that is some of what our society sort of teaches us. And then it goes on to the children, our children, and the next generation, and they grow up with that. John?
I will throw one other thing that might be controversial perhaps, but in our experience, we have also found that generosity is not confined to Christians.
Of course.
We have experienced a lot of generosity with the Japanese, the Indonesians, and the Thai people we've come to know. Very kind, caring, generous people who give and expect nothing in return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think Christians have the market of generosity. It's definitely, it's worldwide. All people.
It's a God-given.
Right? Yeah. It's
Everywhere.
And it points here in the 4th paragraph, pointing to 1 John chapter 4, verse 19, which says, we love because God loved us first. So we love because God loved us first. And again, it's all about that sense that everything comes from God. So Jesus himself gave an example of love, a new commandment. What we're going to be we'll hear those words next Thursday at the Last Supper for Maundy Thursday. A new commandment I give to you, to love one another as I have loved you. And he teaches by literally getting down on his knees and washing the feet of his disciples. A love that is just a deep, abiding love for those who he has discipled for over 3 years, including the very one who will betray him. That is a love that knows no bounds. And because God loved us first, we're called to love. And because God provides for us, we are called to share of that. Not only to give back to God, but to other people.
Yes.
Let's take maybe just a few minutes and talk about that. in your table groups. What does it mean to you when you have those words? All things come from thee, and of thine own have we given thee. How do you experience that in your own life, in terms of the receiving, but also in the giving? Because remember, generosity was about the receiver and the giver. And sometimes we're one, and sometimes we're the other. So let's just talk about that for a few minutes. And how has that made a difference in your own life? And I love the examples that both of you shared. I was watching online. Can you share that?
My wife's
there's the
sister,
With microphone.
mic.
my wife's sister and brother-in-law live in Florida on the West Coast. He is disabled from a heart attack many years ago, and they're retired and living on, they don't have a lot of money. They live in a mobile home, and the mobile home was destroyed in the recent hurricanes. I mean, it's totally wiped out. And the church they belong to contributed to them $20,000 to help get them back on their feet.
That's amazing.
And just gave it to them. And it's not a huge church. It's an incredible blessing.
Yeah.
And that's an example of what we're talking about.
Yeah. It's not a huge church you're mentioning, but people came together to make a difference. On page 48, there was the discussion about scarcity and abundance. Scarcity and abundance. There are people who feel sometimes that they never have enough. And everything.
There's never enough.
Yeah, there's never enough. And they go from a scarcity mindset. And there's also some who feel, well, I can't help anyone because I don't have enough. Right? But Sue, you were also sharing something about people that come on a certain train. Can you share it with the microphone? Because, again, from people who don't have.
My involvement in the border situation made me very aware of some of the migrants who were coming north in an attempt to find safety. They jump on a thing called the Beast, which is a train that comes north, which is also very dangerous because many of them have lost limbs or their life doing such. But nonetheless, they're on the Beast, and as they're coming through these small towns in Mexico, people are out throwing food to them. Now, if you've spent any time in Mexico, you know that there are lots of small little villages where people don't have a whole bunch of stuff.
Right.
But there is that desire to be generous with what they do have.
Right, right.
And actually, I've got another situation that I think of now. There's a gal I know that I see in Nogales, Arizona. He works for Lutheran Social Services. They go and help people out in 2 counties, Cochise and Santa Cruz. She also lives in Nogales, Mexico. Her name is Claudia. Claudia and her husband go every Sunday with food to provide for people who are being sheltered right now in Nogales, Mexico.
Right.
You
For,
know,
for those
she-
watching, they can't come into the U.S. right now and wait. They have to stay on the Mexican
There's been
side.
for a long time. Yeah. So anyway, there's lots of people. There's another aspect of it too, and I mentioned David Brooks.
Yeah.
A book that I read about him. How do we give to people when we meet them? We listen to them.
And you were saying the generosity of listening.
Mm-hmm.
Listening
Yeah.
is another way of
Not
being
eye to
generous.
eye, it's listening.
Yeah.
Yep.
To actually listen is that deep listening we talked about several, before. How do you give of yourself and how do you give of your time? So generosity, it's not just about giving something. A lot of times it's your presence can be a generous gift. Because that goes back to the whole idea of love and compassion. How do we share love and have compassion that goes beyond writing a check or throwing money at something, which we tend to do a lot here. And actually, it's not meant to be a criticism, but it's easier to throw money at something than to actually get involved, to actually be face to face with someone who needs maybe some love and compassion. And some of that comes out of, again, in our society, whether it's Canada or the US, where there's always asking for money on TV. You know, money for the animals, and money for this, and money for that. And it's all good things. But we get also conditioned where by throwing money at something, it's easy to keep that distance. So we're not there to listen. We're not there to hold a hand. We're not there to rub a back or put an arm around somebody who just needs a hug. So generosity can be in so many different ways. Any other sort of illustrations or stories that you could think of, in addition to what's been shared, about generosity of self, or of time, or of a talent, or something that's not just money, and I'm not going to say don't give money. we all need some funds to keep things going, but there's other ways to be generous. Yeah.
So in, it was 2012 now, my husband and I did a section of the Camino to Santiago. So we went from León to Santiago. As we were headed towards the town or the city of Astorga, we're out in the middle of truly nowhere, and we come upon kind of a tent and some tables out front. And there was a man there who, sorry, it's very moving. On the table he had apples, granola bars, and water. There was no water where he lived. There was no store where he lived. He would walk 5 kilometers every 2 days and fill up his wagon. He walked and brought this all back for the pilgrims.
Wow.
And I told my sister, who did the Camino this fall, about this man. And he's still there, still giving.
That is a beautiful story. Yeah, that he would do that, walk 5 kilometers to get some supplies just for the pilgrims.
That's great.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It's so different, and I shouldn't be saying that, but it's so different than what many of us experience here. But not to say that the little things don't happen here. They're always happening. They happen in the parish. They happen in our community. The small, quiet giving of love, of generosity, it happens. So I don't want to say it doesn't happen, but we just don't always see it. And sometimes that's intentional. Sometimes people don't want others to know that they made maybe some soup for someone and quietly dropped it off at their house because they needed something. God is so generous and loving, and all we're asked to do is to reflect some of that and to live some of that in our lives. And by doing so, we experience a gratefulness and the joy. Remember we talked about joy. A joy within. When there's a giving that expects no return. The stories that some of you have shared are so heartwarming because these are people, they're strangers for the most part, yet they're making a difference in their own way, in whatever little way that they can. And that how special that is. And the blessings that flow from God for that, that's there. Now I'm just wondering, experiencing, so 3 of you have mentioned, or 4 of you have mentioned some of those experiences. How has that affected you? Has it made any difference in your life and how you see other people, or anything that maybe you've done? And I'm not trying to get you to wave your flag, because but just to maybe share a little bit. How have those moments or those experiences affected you? And for those watching online, just if you could think of that too. So, anybody? John.
One of the things we had as a lawyer was a pro bono program in which lawyers would volunteer their time and their talents to represent and help give legal advice to people who could not afford it. And that was, when you can help somebody like that, that's really makes you feel like you're really doing something that's worthwhile.
Yeah. When our boys were little, we took them to a pediatric dentist. He was specifically for children, and had just the right ways to deal with kids who were nervous and were afraid of a dentist. I think some adults could use that too, right? His name was Keith. He would take part of his year, based on what you're just talking about, and go up to the Arctic to do dental work with children up in the very north communities. Not just him, but there'll be some others who would do that too. And it was a way of giving back. He was well blessed by his work, and he would give some of that back. And it was all out of his own pocket, and to go and do that. And you probably know of other situations like that too, or even the clinic, the St. Andrew's Clinic, that used to be very active. Most of the people are volunteers, whether they're doctors, orthopedic surgeons, the ones doing the cleft palate. The Shriners are very involved with that too. And just the amount of giving back to make a difference in the lives of people is amazing. And we don't always hear those good news stories, because they always seem to happen, but they're out there, but we just don't see them unless someone makes it a point to say this is what's happening. Or even the volunteers from here at St. Francis that would, when the border's more flowing, that would go down every week. And I know even during COVID, when really wasn't allowed to do anything, there were still those who went down and from this parish and made sure that it wasn't just cut off, that there was something that was still going on. So, any other comments about generosity? So we acknowledge there's so many kinds of ways, different ways of being generous. Beyond money is one part, but there's so many other ways to be generous with ourselves and helping other people. Okay. Well, we're gonna flip over. We're gonna go to patience. Patience.
I don't have any.
Cultivating patience. Wow. So we're only in the beginning of the reflections on patience, because it's only Tuesday, and it really it starts on Sunday, 5th Sunday in Lent, but only been a couple of days to really start looking at it. It says here, on page 1, if patience were a person, she would always be inviting us to do things. She'd invite us for brownies, for dinner, for a hike, for a weekend in the city, for drinks, a manicure, play darts, go hunting, camping, shopping, anything she's always asking. And best of all, she never demands. She just asks sweetly. What do you think of that? Interesting kind of, I don't know, yeah? Patience. If patience was a person, she'd always be inviting us to do things. Does that even make sense? No?
No.
Okay. What is patience? What is patience?
Not losing your temper.
Not losing your temper. Okay. Joyce?
I looked it up in the dictionary because I didn't get anything from what I read. So it said, endure delays and suffering without getting angry or complaining.
Okay.
Long-suffering, tolerating with self-possession. Waiting without getting upset. Enduring difficult situations without complaining. Then it comes from a Latin word, patientia, which actually means suffering. And it's enduring a challenging circumstance. This is the part, over a long period of time without reacting negatively.
That makes more sense.
And calmly waiting for something. And the last thing was, of course, waiting on God's timing, if you're looking at it from a Christian perspective.
Okay. So God's
And that
time.
made sense to me when I started looking and writing. This is the first time I've even written in the book, because it's an area that I struggle with. And I didn't really get anything from them, so I thought, okay, what's the definition? And this has hit me more.
Is there anything in there, in those words, in those definitions that you relate to?
Waiting without getting upset.
So waiting without getting upset.
Mhm.
Okay. So,
And then also where it says without reacting negatively and over a long period of time.
uh-huh.
But it also, so it's like both things. You can get upset real easily, or after a certain period, you just start losing hope, patience of waiting. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. Did you have something to say, Carla? Okay.
You lose patience.
Okay. What about from this table? How do you understand patience? Or what's your definition of patience? In addition to, there was a lot more that I could keep up writing, but how do you understand patience?
I think that about sums it up. Patience to me is, especially being not reacting. When you want to react, waiting, mostly waiting. Yeah.
Okay, so waiting, not reacting. What about impatience? So impatience. There's an interesting, just a very short line, 3/4 down on page 51. It says, my impatience means I'm not paying attention. Impatience, meaning I'm not paying attention. And it goes on to say that patience asks us to be fully present. Patience asks us to be fully present in this very moment. Agree or disagree? Thoughts? So if someone's impatient, someone's talking and you just want to jump in there and get your comments in there, it's an impatience on your part. And when there's an impatience in that particular situation, the odds are you're not really paying attention to what the person's saying. You're just waiting just to get your comment in there, or to refute whatever that person's saying. Is that an experience maybe you've had, or something you've had of someone else? I see heads nodding. So what can you share about that? Carla looks at, oh, John, you wanted to say something, then Carla. Okay.
So, right now in today's political climate, and I hate to bring that up, but that's one of the areas I see is people are not fully listening to each other and want to jump in with their own thoughts, opinions, ideas. And I think hearing the other person, whether we agree or not, you have to do that first in order to make yourself heard as well. And I think we do it also with children, you know. They want to tell us something, but we already know what's going to be best for them or what they should do. And I think we tend to put our adult self over others, like we do over children sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of adults who still act like children. No, seriously. May look older, may look grown up and mature, but emotionally, and in other ways are not much more than children, unfortunately. John?
I'd like to throw this out. The poet, John Milton, who was blind, wrote a sonnet that's called How I Consider How My Light is Spent. And his last line of that is, they also serve who only stand and wait, emphasizing that those unable to actively serve can still serve God through patience and faith, interpreting that because he's blind, he's still able to find meaning and purpose from God in the face of limitations or inactivity because he can't serve.
Wow. Any comments on that?
No, I think in terms of when they say patience invites you, it's like I always feel invited every time I go into Safeway and Continental, because honestly, I walk in and I'll say, and I know the Lord is going to give me an opportunity to practice patience, because inevitably something happens, like somebody pulls out their phone because they're disputing a price, and that just holds everything up, and my popsicles are melting, and I could just feel myself getting more impatient. Or what happened one day, I was waiting and waiting and waiting. There was only 2 cashiers, and then the one lady came by and she said, "Here, I'm going to open up my lane." So I took my cart real quick and went in there, and before I even did anything to put a divider, I just started putting my stuff because she was standing there waiting. And this other lady came up right behind me, almost hit me with her cart, and started pulling out all her groceries, and they were getting mixed up with mine. And all I can think about is, why couldn't, to this lady, well, why couldn't you be patient? Meantime, I'm getting more upset because I'm thinking, why are you, because the cart's just going by. So that's where I really fail in the area of patience. And it just feels like every time, and I've said to myself many times, Joyce, you live in Green Valley. You should have lots of opportunity to practice patience.
That's a very good way of approaching it. especially on the roads in Green Valley,
Yeah.
and yes, in the stores in Green Valley. Yeah. Yeah. And patience in terms of context of today, not talking about politics. There's going to be there's a lot of people patiently waiting to see a change in the market after the sort of the crash of the last few days. So there are a lot of situations and circumstances that test our patience. Like we have to hold on at times, hold on with all our strength to get through something. Which leads us to today's topic about impatience and stress. Patience and stress. So I know, Andrea, you said you read at night, so you wouldn't have read it yet.
No, actually, I did. This is the only one I did read.
Oh, you did read it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It says there's a reciprocal relationship between stress and impatience. When we are stressed, it can lead to our being more impatient with others, with ourselves and with others. Likewise, impatience can make us feel even more stressed, which can in turn drain our energy. It can be a vicious cycle. Anyone ever get stressed?
Oh, gosh.
Is that an oh God, I heard that. Julie, do you have a
I'm
story?
in the middle of it right now.
Okay, we'll pass it. And then John,
I'm just stressed. I mean, I don't know where to start. Like anybody who's taking care of an elderly handicapped person knows the stress. And I was thinking when my son was a little boy, 2-3 years old, I didn't lose my patience with him when he dropped food all over the floor or whatever. He was a child, he was cute, and I, was teaching him different ways. But when you have an adult that you're living with who can drop food all over the floor and not have any idea that he's done it over and over and over and 1,000,001 other things, it's stressful. And I'm starting to lose my patience. I've always been a patient person up till now, but I'm losing my patience big time.
but that's a good example. I mean, it's enough to lose patience with little children, but when we become more of a caregiver, it's hard. It's hard. People don't always have the abilities, they're recovering from something, or just the general changes that happen to us as we get older. And partners and spouses need to almost enter into a new sort of relationship in terms of how we need to be patient with each other, because we change. Well, we're changing. Our needs change, our bodies change, and patience, which maybe wasn't an issue 20 or 30 years before, becomes a real issue now, as the one you love or care about is going through something. John?
What's difficult for me is not reacting negatively.
Okay.
What infuriates me, and it happens all the time around here, is you're in a traffic lane, the light changes, there's somebody in the right-hand lane that pulls out and pulls in front of everybody, rude, or pushes their way in the line ahead of you. And that just really makes me angry.
Okay. So to John's example, what can we do, or what have you done perhaps, to deal with that situation in terms of being a little more patient or holding back from doing the waving the hand or finger or something?
I had to work hard not to tailgate them.
Uh-huh.
Because it just,
Right.
rudeness.
Larissa?
I've been trying to be more patient with people who don't go right away when the light turns green, because I'm also guilty of that. And so
Yeah.
every time I see that happen now, I don't honk my horn. I mean, it depends on the day, but I've been trying to be more aware of that because, like I said, I do it too. And I think in other situations too, that's what helps me when I want to react, is I kind of try to assess, you know, I probably have done the same thing, whether it's, you know, an argument with someone else or whatever. I just try to think like, I'm going to need patience for this too, whatever it is. So I try to think about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
And how does that relate to patience with ourselves? You know, it's hard enough to be patient with other people. What about patience with ourselves? No, Carla, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
That's okay. So in response to John's situation, and I mentioned it at the table earlier, so years ago, so Green Valley is not the only place.
Oh, I know.
Believe me.
Lindsay, Ontario, up in Canada, boy, you have interesting drivers up there too.
Tacoma, Seattle, Portland, you name it.
Yeah.
But years ago, driving one time and heard on the radio a woman say, she said, the way I deal with potential for road rage for myself is, you know, if someone cuts me off or I see someone weaving through traffic and worries me, I back off and I say, I'm giving them room because they're on the way to the hospital to see their dying mother. And so she puts it in that perspective and says, I'm going to give them the space they need because I want them to be safe too.
Mhm.
So,
But that's an interesting way of dealing with it.
And that's maybe likewise the case when somebody's going 20 miles an hour in a 40-mile-an-hour zone. They're probably not on the way to much of anywhere.
Yeah.
Or those who, you're going the speed limit, and they zoom you around because they want to go 50 or 60
Yeah,
before you.
yeah.
It's always the traffic, and it's just, I have real problems with that.
Sounds like that's a growing area for you, John.
Yes, it does.
It has grown over the years.
Yeah. So what about patience with yourselves?
Yeah, that's.
Okay, let's spend maybe 5 minutes with that. When has there been times, and it might be right now you're going through something, I don't know, having to be patient for something within your own life, and the need maybe to forgive yourselves for not being patient. You know, think about something within your own experience, your own lives. So it's not about someone else, it's about you now. So let's take about five minutes or so. Okay, let's get back together.
my father's
Interesting.
This thing is.
Patience with ourselves is a little hard at times, especially when we're going through a lot of frustrations and when situations are out of our control. For those watching from the north, whether north U.S. or into Canada, the ice storm from a week and a half ago was a terrible storm, and the power went off because of 1-inch thick ice that was on tree limbs and branches, knocking down wires, blowing up transformers on poles, and all that kind of awful situation. So my son, Daniel, who is in our northern house, he went 5 days without electricity.
Wow.
And the temperatures were around freezing outside, and actually went down below freezing overnight. So the house was down to about 3 to 4 Celsius, or about 38 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the house. It was hard to get by, and initially stores had no electricity, so you couldn't go get any food. Gasoline was hard to find because most gas stations had no electricity to even pump the gas. So there was a lot of challenges, and patience when your situation's beyond our control, are just throw us over the edge sometimes. And it could be something as simple as you had a doctor's appointment at 2 and it's 3:30 and you're still waiting.
Oh, my God.
Anyone ever experienced that? But I had an appointment. I mean, I've even made appointments to just get my car oil changed. And I could be one of the first ones in the morning, like 7:30 in the morning, and they're still late. So frustrations, patience, all that happens. But with yourself, when I was going through the process towards ordination, it was a long process. And I had to have patience and love for myself in a sort of set out process that I had no real control over. There's step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 20 that you have to go through. And I'd always look at other people saying, oh, they have more faith than I do. They're better than I am. And I would come down on myself. But thankfully, God's grace would always have someone sort of encounter me that would have a good word or would see something that would sort of make me feel a little more, I'm on the right track. So patience with yourselves. Patience with yourselves. A quick example or story.
I would just say one thing. I think that the limitations that result from the aging process, one can be very impatient that we can't do things like we used to be able to do, and it gets very frustrating. You get very impatient because of that.
Yes. And especially people, even if it's not an age-related, but post-surgery.
Exactly.
Post-surgery, to try to get back at doing something right away, and then making the mistake of overdoing it just because they feel good one day, and then they go 10 steps backwards because they've caused more irritation with their knee or hip or whatever it is, or whatever surgery they went through. Patience. Patience is an important part of living. Patience with ourselves, patience with others, patience with the system, patience with government, patience with church, whatever. Anyone else? Okay. I think we'll finish off here. Now next week, we won't be able to meet because it's Holy Week, and the Tuesday is the annual service at the cathedral in Phoenix for the blessing of oils and reaffirming our ordination vows. So all clergy are expected to be there. So there will not be a class next week, but we're starting next week in the book. If you go to towards the beginning, you'll see the table of contents, a couple of pages in from the front of the book. And we get into Holy Week. So this week is about cultivating patience, and then we get into some reflections related to Holy Week, for Palm Sunday, and then the theme for Holy Week is walking the way of love. So really it's the last week of reflections for you. And then it has for Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter Sunday. So since we can't meet next week, finish the week on patience, cultivating patience. So you have to be patient, cultivating patience. And then for the Holy Week itself, if you could just go on and do your own reading, mark up, take note of things, whatever it is. The week after, unfortunately, I've something else scheduled. I think you also have something scheduled with Ken and Debbie. So I'm thinking maybe the last week of April, if we can try to get together. And I'm going to try to get even the other group that I meet on Thursday, maybe we could all just come together and finish on the 29th, if that works for everyone. The 29th, so that would be last Tuesday of the month. Would that work for you? And what I want to do on that day is also kind of just a very quick review. Bring whatever it is from, whether it's the first week or second, third week, whatever it is, bring it here, and we'll do a review time and round it off with, of course, the Holy Week reflections. So if we can do that, that would be great. We're going to finish off with a prayer. I just got to find the prayer here. And the closing prayer comes from Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. So let us pray. Merciful Jesus, you are my guide, the joy of my heart, the author of my hope, and the object of my love. I come seeking refreshment and peace. Show me your mercy, relieve my fears and anxieties, and grant me a quiet mind and an expectant heart, that by the assurance of your presence I may learn to abide in you, who is my Lord and my God. Amen. Well, thank you, everybody. So, as I mentioned, we'll meet again the last Tuesday.
Are you going to put a notice in the bulletin?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I'd like, for those who were unable to come but have been following online, I'm hoping we could get as many back together, and maybe some of the Thursday group to come and just have one giant group to kind of round off and finish.
Thank you, you've done a great job.
Well, thank you, John.